I bet the last film you watched was made in Hollywood. This isn't a bad thing. Hollywood has been known to dominate the film industry for about a century, crossing 21.3 billion US dollars in 2021. This steady success has inspired and promoted other countries to create their own space within the film industry, such as with Bollywood in India and Nollywood in Nigeria. The history behind Africa's developing film industry is something I find to be fascinating, especially the overlooked aspect of how female representation has come to be what it is today. Let's discuss it. This is the evolving representation of women in African film. Cinema in Africa began rooted to the European colonialism and post-colonial aftermath that shaped it, with films being financed, directed and distributed by Europeans and Americans. Following the decolonization of many African countries in the mid to late 50s to 1975, an independent film industry was able to start forming. One of the earliest films that explores the way colonialism influenced the way the world viewed Africa is Ousmane Sembène's Black Girl, made in 1966. The film follows Joanna's life as she works as a domestic servant for a French family both in her home country Senegal, then later on France. It is clear that women are depicted as being focused on their domestic responsibility throughout the film. Both Joanna and her employer, Madame, are focused on the maintenance of the household duties such as cooking and cleaning, but they are also expected to raise and care for their children. Joanna takes on the bulk of this responsibility as she has worked to the point of exhaustion, being pushed and degraded by Madame to dress poorly, get little sleep, and won't feed her unless she works. At the French couple's dinner, one of the guests kisses Joanna, exclaiming, "I've never kissed a black girl before," objectifying and exoticizing her. This brings up the Western view of Africa as being exotic and foreign, highlighting the otherness that is present throughout Black Girl. We also see women being represented as family-oriented, as Joanna's mother sends her a letter that Monsoir, her other employer, reads out asking why she hasn't heard from her, and if she could send money. It is expected of Joanna to provide for her family back in Senegal, whilst taking care of her employer's family, creating an immense pressure to live up to. This is made clear as Joanna's treatment and abuse led to her committing suicide, slitting her own throat in the family's bathtub. It's clear that women are viewed as being motherly, taking care of children and of the home, doing housework and mostly depending on their male counterparts to go out and work. This depiction sees women as being the backbone of the family, upholding a double standard of maintaining the family, but also providing for it too. Although this depiction became rather common in African cinema, it didn't remain this way for very long. Moving forward to 1988, Oliver Schmitz released the South African crime film Mafanzula. Throughout the film, we follow Panic, a petty thief, as he navigates his way around life and his relationships during the apartheid. We meet Panic's girlfriend Pat, whose representation shows us something similar to that of Black Girl, as she is seen working as a maid. However, outside of her work, she tends to spend most of her time with her boyfriend, following along with whatever they're doing. Schmitz was criticized for this, as it could be argued that Pat's character could have played a much more influential role with both the plot and also with Panic, rather than playing a bystander. In the final scenes of the film, we see a group of men and women protesting together against their mistreatment from the apartheid government when Panic's mother is shot and killed. From this, we begin to see the depictions of women as more active within the community, being involved in protests and even being killed for it. This glimpse into a diverse representation of women is further explored in 1996 as we are introduced to Ingrid Sinclair's film, Flame. We follow the Rhodesian Bush War as Florence, a young teenage girl, runs off with her friend to join the Zimbabwe African National Liberation Army, also known as ZANLA. The pair make their way across the border to Mozambique, to a ZANLA training camp, where they take on their new identities as Flame and Liberty. During Flame's time at the training camp, she is raped by Comrade Shay, a ZANLA political commissar, leaving her pregnant. Although Flame finds herself devastated at first, she decides to have and raise the child in the camp alongside Shay, who both later die in an airstrike. Facing this loss, Flame chooses to invest herself fully into the war efforts of ZANLA. This depiction takes a completely different outlook on how women are represented, as it shows a heavy involvement of women in many of the male-dominated spaces and roles, such as in the army, leading attacks and making decisions. In exploring this depiction of women being fighters and doing the same work as men, we are offered an accurate representation of the roles women play within society. In the conclusion of the film, we see Flame choose to leave her husband to join Liberty in Harare, where she has created a lucrative life for herself. Flame asks if Liberty would help her financially, but Liberty no longer believes in the collective living, which they once pursued back in the training camp. As an ending to the story, this was not usually seen in African cinema, as it's typical for stories concerning women to choose to live happily with their husbands. The use of this alternative ending is impactful, as it provides us with the representation that women are more capable of leading in the male-dominated spaces, and also that they are able to remain independent and focus on their own lives. With these developments in representation of women in African cinema continue, we begin to see how they influence our approach to modern problems and depictions. Entering 2010, we see Viva Riva released in Congo, giving us a crime thriller following the story of Riva, a fuel smuggler being tracked down by an Angolan gangster called Caesar. During the story, we meet Nora, a local gangster's girlfriend, who Riva is attracted to and seeks her out after she escapes from the violence of the gangs. Nora is mostly seen as the sexually attractive woman that men lust after, so much so that her partner forbids her from leaving his side, keeping her contained even when in the house. Contrasting this, we also meet the Commandant, a local military officer who's blackmailed into helping Caesar by kidnapping and threatening her sister. In their tracking, the Commandant is revealed to have a fling with another woman. This holds significance as queerness is normally seen as taboo, especially queerness in women, which is typically sexualized through a straight male's perspective. However, in the film, it is not questioned or mentioned again. This opens up a representation, normalizing the idea and image of queer women and allowing us to better understand the usually fetishized depictions of lesbians, and also a more inclusive way to represent queer people. Although these two depictions oppose one another, they provide us with a diverse, modern representation of issues that women face, showing us how they are seen by others. Despite women being in positions of power, like the military, they are still viewed through a sexual, manipulatable lens by men, as they pursue, exploit, and abuse them. Even with this perspective placed upon the representation, we see that the realities of the women continue to translate to film successfully. Winuri Kahiu's Rafiki, released in 2018, opens up a discussion regarding women in Kenya and how they may navigate their queerness publicly and privately. Through the film, we witness two girls, Ziki and Kana, as they catch feelings for one another, hiding their relationship from everyone for their own safety due to the homophobic dispositions that the people around them have. Rafiki takes on an alternative viewpoint, as it mainly follows the perspective of these two girls, excluding influences of the male gaze, both inside and outside of the film. In this film, we do see men play a role in the relationship, but this role is mostly negative, such as with their father splitting them up and separating them, and with Kana's friend Blackstar. The girls aren't depicted in a sexual, manipulated, or domestic light, offering us with a far more accurate and honest representation of both women, but also queer women struggling to live in areas where queerness is misunderstood and discriminated against. Towards the end of Rafiki, Riki and Kana's relationship is uncovered, causing an uproar and disgust amongst the locals as they pull the two apart and begin attacking them. After the two have been arrested and picked up by their families, Kana tries to visit Riki and comfort her, but Riki informs Kana that she is being sent to London and doesn't want to see her again. As Kana is left to focus on her career in Nairobi, she becomes a doctor, moving on with her life. We skip ahead in time to Kana working in a local hospital where she is informed that Riki has returned, giving her hope. Kana goes looking to find her, waiting at a familiar spot where they both know where it's suggested that they are reunited. This hopeful ending presents us with new ideas of queer understanding and acceptance, showing us that queer people and relationships should be treated equally alongside its heteronormative counterparts. Rafiki challenges traditional ideas of what is normal, like we see in Black Girl Mapansula, providing people with insight and understanding of how queer people are perceived and the mistreatment they face on a daily basis. In conclusion, we see through these films the drastic evolution that the female representation has undergone across the continent, beginning with traditionally outdated depictions of women in the role of domestic and family responsibilities, and breaking this down slowly, opening up the truth behind the impactful role women really play within society. This highlights the diversity and impact that women have across Africa, as they play vital roles in society such as military officers, caretakers, police force, mothers, and doctors to name a few. Moving forward, we are presented with a promising future for female representation, allowing it to develop alongside the reality of issues, maintaining the truth.